Put one hand on the back of your neck. Not hard. Not like you are fixing yourself. Just place your palm there, where the skull seems to become spine, and let your elbow fall heavy for a moment. Now turn your head a little to one side, only until the skin begins to pull and the muscles under your hand answer with a quiet resistance. Stop there. Hold it for 15 seconds. Do not chase pain. Do not force the joint. Do not try to become flexible in the next breath. Just let the stretch arrive like a message that was already inside you, waiting for enough silence to be noticed. Count slowly. Your brain is already listening. Before anything changes in the mirror, before your posture looks different, before a muscle becomes longer in any meaningful mechanical sense, something more subtle has started. The stretch has turned a part of your body into a question. The tissues are not asking for motivation. They are asking for coordinates. Where am I? How far can I go? Am I safe here? 15 seconds is not a workout. It is barely an interruption. It is shorter than the time you spend unlocking your phone, shorter than the time it takes for a video to load, shorter than the pause between one worried thought and the next. And still, inside that small pocket of time, your nervous system begins doing something that most people only notice when it fails. It updates the map. This is the strange part. You think stretching belongs to the muscle. The hamstring feels tight, so you stretch the hamstring. The neck feels stiff, so you tilt the neck. The shoulder feels trapped, so you pull the arm across the chest. The sensation seems local, so the story becomes local. Tight muscle, short muscle, old chair, bad sleep. But the stretch is not only happening where you feel it. The stretch is traveling. It is being converted from pull into voltage, from pressure into timing, from mechanical deformation into a stream of information climbing toward the spinal cord, the cerebellum, the thalamus, and the cortex. A piece of you is reporting back to the brain. And the brain, for a few seconds, has to stop pretending your body is just background. Stephen Hawking understood something about the body that most healthy people avoid. He spent his life in a condition where movement could not be taken for granted. Small muscular signals became precious. A tiny voluntary action, a twitch, a click, a cheek movement, could become a doorway between thought and world. His genius was cosmic, but his daily reality was brutally physical. The universe could be described by equations, but a sentence still needed a body to cross the distance from mind to matter. That is why a 15-second stretch is not trivial. It is a negotiation with the only instrument through which your brain has ever met reality. The paradox is that stretching feels like you are lengthening a muscle, but the first organ to change may be the brain. Not permanently in 15 seconds, not magically, not as a cure for anything, but immediately, electrically, measurably. The nervous system receives a burst of information it does not get while you sit still in the same collapsed shape for hours. Your modern day is full of motion and strangely empty of movement. Your thumbs move, your eyes jump, your attention fragments, but your joints repeat the same narrow angles. Your spine holds the same unfinished curve. Your hips sit in the same folded position. Your shoulders hover in the same guarded architecture. The body is not motionless. It is undersampled. A stretch is sampling. A 15-second stretch says to the brain, here is the edge of the current map. Here is tension. Here is resistance. Here is a line you have not visited today. And the question is not whether you are flexible. The question is what happens to a brain that stops receiving fresh information from the body it is supposed to govern. Before we go deeper, subscribe and like the video if you want this series to keep turning tiny gestures into real biology, not slogans. Then return to the stretch in your own body, because the next part only makes sense if you have felt at least one muscle report back. Your muscles are not ropes. This belief is the first mistake. A rope can be pulled, lengthened, tied, cut, or replaced. A muscle is living tissue, but even that description is incomplete. A muscle is also a sensing organ. It does not just obey the brain, it informs the brain. It is filled with specialized receptors that measure length, tension, speed, pressure, and change. Your nervous system does not control the body from a distant throne. It controls the body through a constant exchange of predictions and corrections. Inside your muscles are muscle spindles, tiny sensory organs wrapped among the muscle fibers. Their job is not poetic. They detect changes in length and the speed of those changes. When a muscle is stretched, the spindle changes its firing. That firing travels through sensory nerves toward the spinal cord and up into higher centers. The stretch is not merely felt, it is encoded. Near the junctions where muscles pull on tendons, another class of receptor, the Golgi tendon organ, measures tension. If muscle spindles are like length reporters, Golgi tendon organs are like strain gauges in a bridge. They are not interested in your opinion about comfort. They are interested in load. How much force is passing through this line? How much stress is being placed on this structure? Can the system continue without tearing itself apart? This is why a simple stretch can feel strangely intelligent. You lean into it, and your body does not answer with one sensation. It answers with layers. A pulling line, a heat, a tremble, a small urge to back away, a release that may or may not arrive. Each layer is a different channel of information, and each channel is being interpreted by a nervous system that has spent your entire life trying to keep you upright without asking for conscious permission. One of the most cited modern summaries of this field comes from Uwe Proske at Monash University and Simon Gandavia at Neuroscience Research Australia. In their 2012 review on proprioception, they describe how the senses of body position and movement depend heavily on signals from muscle spindles, skin, joints, and motor commands. The important point is simple enough to feel. Your brain does not know where your body is by looking at it from the inside. It knows through incoming signals and predicted signals, compared again and again. Proprioception is your inner sense of position, the body's dark vision of itself. You use it when you bring a glass to your mouth without watching your hand. You use it when you walk downstairs while looking at someone's face. You use it when you scratch an itch on your back without a mirror. You use it right now if your eyes are closed and you still know whether your knees are bent. But proprioception is not fixed. It can become blurry. Sit too long, move too little, repeat too many narrow gestures, and the map gets quiet in some areas and noisy in others. The brain still has a body map, but parts of it become like old roads on a neglected chart. Present, but less trustworthy. Stiffness is often described as a property of tissue, but it can also be the feeling of a nervous system that does not trust a range of motion. The common belief says tightness means the muscle is short. The science is more interesting. Tightness can mean the system is guarding a range it has not recently measured. That does not mean tissue length is irrelevant. Connective tissue, muscle architecture, hydration, injury history, and training all matter. But the first seconds of stretching are not a construction project. They are a conversation. The tissue is not rebuilt in 15 seconds. The brain is updated in 15 seconds. There is a reason 15 seconds matters. In a 2012 review in the International Journal of Sports Physical Therapy, Phil Page summarized evidence on current concepts in muscle stretching and noted that the greatest changes in range of motion during static stretching often occur between 15 and 30 seconds, with longer holds not always adding proportionally more for typical flexibility outcomes. That does not make 15 seconds a magic number. It makes it a threshold where the nervous system has enough time to notice, but not so much time that the gesture becomes a performance. A 15-second stretch is long enough for the body to stop treating the pull as a surprise. It is long enough for the first protective reflex to soften around the edges. It is long enough for attention to move from the screen back into flesh. And it is short enough that you cannot hide behind the excuse of time. Think of your body like a large city whose traffic lights are controlled by sensors buried under the roads. If cars never pass through a certain district, the control center does not receive enough data. It does not know whether the road is open, damaged, safe, or abandoned. When you stretch, you send traffic through a forgotten district. Not to rebuild the city instantly, to remind the control center that the district exists. The neck you stretch after hours of leaning forward is not just a sore neck. It is a district of the map that has been forced to report the same angle all day. The hip you open after sitting is not just a tight hip. It is a hinge whose usual vocabulary has become too small. The chest you stretch after curling around a phone is not just muscle. It is a boundary between breath, posture, mood, and attention. A stretch turns anatomy into news, and the brain is an organ that changes its behavior according to news. The first layer begins in milliseconds. As soon as you move into the stretch, mechanical force deforms the muscle and surrounding tissues. Muscle spindles respond to the change in length. Sensory fibers carry the signal into the spinal cord. Some of that information participates in spinal reflexes, including the stretch reflex, the fast loop that helps resist sudden lengthening and protect the muscle from being pulled too far too quickly. This is why bouncing into a stretch feels different from slowly entering one. A quick stretch can amplify the alarm. A slow stretch gives the receptors a different pattern. Speed matters because the nervous system is not simply measuring position, it is measuring change. A sudden pull sounds like threat. A gradual pull sounds like information. In those first seconds, your brain receives not just a fact, but a tone. The tone says whether the body is being attacked or invited. The second layer unfolds over seconds. If you hold the position without forcing, the system begins to accommodate. The sensation may remain, but its meaning can shift. What felt sharp becomes broad. What felt like resistance becomes warmth. What felt like a wall becomes a boundary. Part of this is mechanical, because viscoelastic tissues behave differently under sustained load. But much of what you call release is nervous system interpretation. The brain adjusts its expectation. The spinal cord changes the gain of reflex activity. Attention changes the emotional label attached to the sensation. Gain is the volume knob of a circuit. When gain is high, a small signal becomes loud. When gain is lower, the same signal can be tolerated without panic. Stretching carefully does not need to silence the body. It can turn down the alarm enough for the brain to receive more detail. This is where the cerebellum matters. People think of the cerebellum as a balance organ, but it is more like a prediction machine for movement. It compares what the brain expected to happen with what sensory feedback reports actually happened. Every stretch gives the cerebellum a discrepancy to work with. The body expected one range, then you entered another. The brain expected stiffness, then the tissue tolerated a little more. The system expected danger, then nothing broke. That mismatch is information. Not comfort, information. The third layer is the one most people miss. A stretch can influence the state of the whole organism because body maps are not isolated from mood, breathing, attention, or threat. The same brain that tracks joint position also estimates safety. The same nervous system that regulates muscle tone also regulates heart rate, respiration, and arousal. When you stretch slowly and breathe without bracing, you are not only pulling tissue, you are giving the nervous system a chance to experience controlled sensation without emergency. That matters because modern stress often has no clean muscular conclusion. You receive an email, but you do not run. You feel pressure, but you do not push. You anticipate conflict, but you sit still. The body prepares for action, and then action never arrives. Muscle tone becomes a storage form for unfinished readiness. Stretching for 15 seconds does not solve the problem that created the readiness. It does something smaller and more physical. It gives the readiness a shape. It says, this is tension, and this is the edge, and here is a way to meet it without escalating. Hawking's work reminds us that energy is never just a vague feeling. In physics, energy is the capacity to do work, the accounting of what can change. In a human body, the word gets abused until it means mood, motivation, spirituality, caffeine, or charisma. But your nervous system has its own energy economy. It decides where effort is needed, where protection is needed, where attention is needed, and where movement is allowed. A stiff body can be energetically expensive, not because stiffness is morally bad, because guarding costs. Holding the shoulders slightly raised all day costs, keeping the jaw prepared costs, maintaining shallow breath under a locked rib cage costs, preventing movement in ranges that feel uncertain costs. The cost is not always dramatic. It appears as fatigue that does not match your activity, irritability that does not match the situation, restlessness in a body that has barely moved, a sense that your brain is tired of carrying you. The body can waste energy by defending itself from movements that are not actually dangerous. A stretch is one way to test the defense. Here the comparison with industry becomes useful. In robotics and aerospace, a system that moves safely through space needs feedback. Sensors measure position, force, acceleration, temperature, strain. Without feedback, the machine either moves blindly or locks itself down to avoid damage. Engineers do not call this weakness. They call it control. A machine without sensory feedback must become rigid, conservative, and inefficient. Your body faces the same problem. When the brain lacks fresh proprioceptive feedback, it may choose caution. Caution feels like tightness. Caution feels like stiffness. Caution feels like a range of motion that closes not because the door is welded shut, but because the guard does not recognize your face. Stretching is identification. You show the nervous system the boundary again. If this kind of science gives you a different respect for your own body, subscribe and like the video. Not because stretching is a secret hack, but because the smallest gestures often reveal the deepest machinery. Now consider what happens when this does not happen for months. A modern body can go entire days without visiting its edges. You sit with hips at 90 degrees. You type with elbows bent. You hold the head forward. You sleep curled. You stand with the same leg taking more weight. You walk on flat surfaces that ask almost nothing from your joints. Your body still moves, but mostly inside a small cage of familiar angles. The brain adapts to that cage. This adaptation can feel like aging before aging. You turn your head while driving and feel the neck resist. You reach overhead and the shoulder feels foreign. You stand after sitting and your hips need a few seconds to remember extension. You bend forward and the back interprets the request as an insult. You are not broken in these moments. You are meeting the border of a map that has not been refreshed. Two symptoms often appear under other names. The first is mental fatigue. You blame the workload, and sometimes you are right. But part of the fatigue can come from a body held in low-grade defensive tone all day. If the brain is constantly managing unnecessary muscle tension, posture corrections, discomfort signals, and threat predictions from stiff tissues, attention has less room. The mind feels crowded because the body is sending background noise. The second is restlessness. You feel tired, but you cannot settle. You lie down, but the body does not believe the day is complete. This can happen when stress chemistry has prepared you for movement, while your lifestyle has only allowed stillness. The stretch becomes a small physical punctuation mark. It does not erase stress. It gives the nervous system a clear sensory event with a beginning, middle, and end. Over weeks and months, the absence of varied movement can narrow what the brain expects from the body. The range you do not use becomes less represented. The position you never enter becomes less trusted. The tissue may lose tolerance, but the nervous system also loses familiarity. Then the next time you need that range, the brain interprets it as unusual, and unusual can become unsafe. The common belief is that stiffness means your body is getting old. The mechanism rewrites it. Stiffness often means your brain has stopped receiving enough evidence that movement is still safe. This sentence matters because it changes the emotional tone. Oldness feels like a verdict. evidence can be gathered. A 15-second stretch is evidence. Not evidence that you are healed. Not evidence that you are transformed. Evidence that the body can enter a slightly larger shape, remain there, breathe there, and return. The timescale is humble. One stretch may change sensation for a moment. A few days may change awareness. A few weeks of daily brief stretching may change your relationship with certain ranges, because the nervous system sees them repeatedly without catastrophe. The body learns through repetition, but not only through intensity. It learns through safe exposure. This is why forcing the stretch can ruin the message. Pain teaches threat. Aggression teaches guarding. If you use stretching as punishment for sitting, the nervous system may record the gesture as another form of attack. The body does not become more open because you insult it with leverage. It becomes more available when the signal is clear enough to be trusted. There is an old cruelty hidden in many fitness cultures. They treat the body like an animal that must be dominated. Pull harder, go deeper, break limits. But the nervous system is not impressed by violence. It is persuaded by evidence. 15 seconds is not domination. It is testimony. The most unexpected system touched by stretching may be attention. Attention is not only something you direct outward. It is also something the body can reclaim from the world. When you stretch, especially slowly, attention is pulled away from abstract threat and into immediate sensation. The edge of a muscle is hard to outsource. You cannot delegate it to a notification. You cannot convert it into a headline. You must feel it from the inside. This is interoception and proprioception meeting. Interoception is the sensing of the internal body, like breath, heartbeat, pressure, temperature, and visceral state. Proprioception is the sensing of position and movement. A slow stretch can bring both forward. You feel where the limb is, and you feel what the effort does to breath. You feel the joint angle, and you feel whether the face tightens. You feel the pull, and you notice whether the mind turns it into danger or simply data. This is why stretching can feel emotionally strange. A hip stretch can make you impatient. A chest stretch can make you vulnerable. A neck stretch can make you aware of how much vigilance you carry. None of this requires mystical explanation. The body areas involved in movement, posture, breathing, and defense have been paired with emotional states for years. When you change the shape, the memory of the state can flicker. Again, no miracle is needed. The brain is embodied. It learned your life through posture, and posture can whisper back. Evolution makes this obvious. Your ancestors did not need a phone reminder to move through ranges. Survival required squatting, reaching, climbing, turning, throwing, lifting, carrying, crouching, and sleeping on surfaces that did not mold perfectly around inactivity. The nervous system evolved in a world where the body was constantly giving it varied mechanical feedback. Modern life removed much of that feedback and then sold us interventions for the discomfort of its absence. A 15-second stretch is not wellness culture. It is a return of missing input. Think of Hawking again, but carefully. His condition was not a metaphor. It was a severe disease, and nothing about stretching should be used to romanticize or simplify disability. The lesson is not that movement solves everything. The lesson is almost the opposite. When movement is threatened, reduced, or lost, its informational value becomes undeniable. A tiny signal can matter. A small, preserved pathway can carry enormous meaning. A body does not need dramatic motion for movement to become profound. For most people, the tragedy is different. The body still offers countless signals, and they are ignored because they are ordinary. Stretching for 15 seconds is a way of answering one of them. Now the protocol must stay simple, because the mechanism is simple only when you do not corrupt it with ambition. Choose one stretch each day, not 10. 1. Pick the place that has been trapped in the smallest shape. If you sit all day, choose the hip flexors or the chest. If you look down all day, choose the neck. If you type all day, choose the forearms. If you stand locked in tension, choose the calves. The goal is not total flexibility. The goal is to send clear information from an under-visited region. Enter the stretch slowly over 3 to 5 seconds. This matters because the muscle spindle responds strongly to speed. If you rush, the body may hear danger. If you enter gradually, the body receives a measured change. Stop before sharp pain. The right edge feels like tension you can breathe inside, not pain you must escape. Hold for 15 seconds. During the hold, relax the face first. This is not decorative. The jaw, eyes, and neck are often part of the threat pattern. If your face is bracing, the brain may interpret the stretch as a fight. Let the breath remain quiet. Do not perform deep breathing like a task. Just avoid holding the breath, because breath holding can raise the sense of effort and turn the stretch into a struggle. The sign that the mechanism is active is not dramatic release. The sign is increased detail. At first, you feel one blunt sensation: tight. After several seconds, you may feel lines, warmth, pulsing, asymmetry, or a small change in the urge to resist. Detail means the map is waking. Detail means the brain is receiving more than alarm. Leave the stretch slowly. The exit is part of the message. If you snap out of the position, you teach the system that the edge was something to flee. If you return gradually, you complete the loop. Movement went out. Information came in. Movement returned. Nothing had to panic. For people with pain, injury, neurological conditions, dizziness, recent surgery, or medical uncertainty, the rule changes. The stretch should be smaller, supported, and cleared with a qualified professional when needed. A stretch is not a treatment plan. It is not a substitute for diagnosis. It should never be used to push through symptoms that feel sharp, electric, unstable, or alarming. The variation for limited mobility is still valid. You can stretch a finger, a wrist, the side of the neck, the ankle, the toes, or even the muscles of the face with tiny controlled movement. The nervous system does not require spectacle. It requires signal. A small, safe range can be more useful than a large, threatening one. There are 3 common errors that erase the effect. The first is chasing depth. Depth flatters the ego, but the nervous system cares about clarity. The second is multitasking. If you stretch while scrolling, part of the sensory update is stolen by the screen. The third is turning the stretch into a moral correction, as if the body must be punished for being stiff. Shame increases threat. Threat increases guarding. Guarding is what you were trying to soften. The minimum dose is 1 15-second hold once a day, performed with attention and without pain. That sounds too small because modern culture respects exhaustion more than precision, but biology is often precise before it is dramatic. Comment below with the one place in your body that feels most under-visited right now: neck, hips, chest, calves, hands, back, or somewhere else. Naming the region already changes how you listen to it. The final layer is not about flexibility. Flexibility is too small a word for what is really at stake. A flexible person can still live as if the body were an inconvenience. A stiff person can still begin to listen with extraordinary honesty. The deeper issue is whether your brain still has a living relationship with the body, or whether it has reduced the body to transportation, appearance, labor, and complaint. Stretching interrupts that reduction. For 15 seconds, the body is not an object you manage. It is not a project. It is not proof of discipline. It becomes a field of information, a place where the mind discovers that it has edges, and those edges are not enemies. The pull in the muscle is not merely discomfort. It is the border between the known and the forgotten. Hawking looked at the universe and saw that emptiness was not empty. Space had structure. Black holes had temperature. Boundaries had consequences. What seemed silent could still contain activity too subtle for ordinary intuition. In a much smaller, human way, the body is like that. The still place is not still. The tight place is not mute. The edge is not nothing. Your brain is always making a universe out of signals. When the signals shrink, the universe shrinks. A stretch expands it by a fraction. Not enough to impress anyone watching, not enough to post, not enough to become a new identity. Just enough to remind the brain that the body has not ended where the chair said it ended, where the desk said it ended, where the phone said it ended, where fear said it ended. There is dignity in that. A 15-second stretch is a small act of contact with reality. It tells the nervous system that you are still here, not as a thought floating above the shoulders, but as a living architecture of sensors, fibers, joints, predictions, memories, and breath. It asks nothing grand. It does not demand a new life by morning. It only opens one door in the map and waits. And maybe that is why the gesture matters. Because a brain that can feel the body more clearly may stop confusing numbness with peace. Because a body that is visited daily may stop needing to shout to be heard. Because the edge you avoid is sometimes not the place where you are weakest, but the place where your brain is waiting for new evidence. 15 seconds. A quiet pull. A signal returning from the dark. The universe inside you redraws one line.